Hello and welcome to episode 192 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we finally have some roster confirmations around the Call of Duty League. We actually have a roster relocation or a team relocation as well to talk about, and a rumored team relocation that could possibly happen over the next year or so. We'll see what happens with that. And we got some other stuff to talk about as well. But before we get to any of that, how are you doing, Bink?
Yeah, doing all right. Like you said, pretty sure I wrote down here. Yeah, last time we went live was August 23rd. So, we went through a stretch right after that show where not much happened. And I wouldn't say a ton has happened, but it's definitely heated up over the last couple days. So, uh, felt like it was time we sat down and had a good chat about some of this stuff. Some good stuff. Roster moves, rebands, like you said, and reports on everything from some of those other teams that we haven't really talked a ton about to potential events next year and everything and anything in between. So it should be a good one tonight.
Yeah, the biggest news obviously is not only that Cellium officially joined the Falcons, which we had had a lot of reasons to believe. A lot of the reports were indicating that that was going to be the case this offseason. But the real biggest news is that the Falcons are no longer the Vegas Falcons as they were last season in the CDL. They are officially the Riyadh Falcons, and they have relocated, at least in theory, because none of this stuff actually matters in the realm of the Call of Duty League. But in team name, they have relocated to Saudi Arabia, which is where the Falcons organization already is and originated from. So that's interesting. I'm not sure exactly what it means because we haven't of course, gotten a ton of information on all of the events that we will see during the 2026 CDL season, but I would assume that this would probably lead to another Saudi Arabia event. We haven't had an official CDL Saudi Arabia event. We've had the Esports World Cup each of the last 2 years, but this would make me think that Falcons would host one of the majors in Saudi Arabia. But I do want to get your thoughts on this because it is interesting. It's another team relocation. We've had so many over the 5 or 6 years that we've had the CDL. But what do you think about this one in particular? This is, I think, the only time in CDL history that a team has relocated outside of America. They've come in from England and France and some other countries, but I think those might be the only two. But they've come over to America. But now we have another a team going the other way. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think the event discussion or whatever that you were bringing up, I think it's a little too early to know for sure what's going to go on that front and in that aspect of it, because it does seem to me like the Esports World Cup is here to stay in partnership with the CDL, and I would be surprised if the CDL actually wanted. I mean, as far as I don't know the exact distance, but I'm pretty sure that's like a full day's worth of travel for most of the U.S. players over to Saudi Arabia. So it's a long travel day. I don't know if the league wants to have the players doing that twice. Um, Based on the current schedule and everything, with the Esports World Cup being the last event of the year, I would especially be surprised if they did, like, just using last year's schedule as an example, like Major 4 in Saudi Arabia, then Champs in the US or wherever, and then the Esports World Cup after that in Saudi Arabia. So like that traveling there twice in a short span of time. Maybe we see a quote unquote home event for Falcons, like the first event of a year in an upcoming year. But I think as long as the Esports World Cup is a part of the CDL and it's happening over there, I think that might just in relation be their quote unquote home event. I'm not really sure. But maybe we'll get more insight on that as time goes on. Um, in terms of the rebrand, that is an interesting point that you made in terms of a team that had. Well, it's weird to say they had their roots in the U.S. because they got the spot and it just happened to be the Vegas team that used
Yeah.
to be the Paris team, but nonetheless, going the opposite direction, like you said, that is an interesting note. I just think it does make a ton of sense. It really didn't make sense for Falcons to have the Vegas spot because, I mean, I don't even know if there are Falcons in Vegas. I guess on that note, too, I don't know how many Falcons there are in Atlanta for the NFL team, but
Not any good
getting
ones.
back on track, I think, just going with the Riyadh name just makes a ton more sense. I feel like over the last 3-ish, maybe more years, but it feels like 3-ish years to me, like Falcons has become known as that like Saudi Arabian org. I know there are
Yeah.
other orgs and stuff that have been rumored to potentially be interested in the CDL and whatnot, so it might be interesting to see how this relocation impacts those other potential suitors. But just with Falcons' identity from the outside looking in, it feels like, they're so tied to Saudi Arabia. Having just that Riyadh name just makes a ton of sense to me from an organizational standpoint. Makes a hell of a lot more sense to me than Vegas Falcons. And uh, third part of this, I guess, yeah, with Cellium being confirmed. It seems like the reports are starting to be confirmed, and I don't think there's been anything officially said on Pred and XNIT. I know they obviously haven't said anything about Kismet, who's the reported fourth, but getting Cellium officially announced alongside that rebrand, it's a good start to the offseason for Falcons, and based on all the numbers being thrown around and stuff, it seems like it was a hefty price tag, but you're paying that hefty price for arguably one of the best AR players in the current CDL era, and potentially, when it's all said and done, maybe one of the best AR players of all time. So, yeah, it's been interesting to see this all roll out over the last couple of weeks. But like I said, I do think the rebrand makes a ton of sense for Falcons. We can talk more about their roster and stuff when it's all said and done. But I guess, yeah, bigger implication is we know for sure now Cell is officially no longer on FaZe. Last episode, we talked about the Tiny Terrors, Inabizi, and Simp officially splitting up. We don't know Abizi's destination for sure. It's reportedly LA Thieves. But we do know now for sure that Cellium is gone, and I said it last episode when we talked about Abizi and Simp. Whenever Cellium plays against his former FaZe teammates, that's an instant narrative and storyline and we know that Cellium is known for talking trash in game chat and stuff like that, and just being a little funny with his remarks and whatnot. So um, hopefully we get to see some of that banter and whatnot play out as the season goes on. But yeah, excited for his first showdown against some of his former teammates. Excited to see how this all plays out for Falcons, and we can talk more about the roster once we know it for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting just to see because everybody does it when longtime teammates or even a coach and player, when they split up, it's always okay, who won the departure or who won the split. Tom Brady, Belichick is obviously a great example. Tom Brady won the split, and there have been many others. But in esports, it's a little bit different because teams and players, they split so often typically that it never really makes sense to compare the two a ton. But with this, it's obvious that we actually will have a ton of information about what they were like together, and potentially a ton of information about what they were like separately, all three of them, and how they do without each other. Of course, Selim did play on FaZe in Black Ops 4 without Abizi and Simp, but that was, I think, his only pro season period that he played without them. Simp, of course, has never played as a pro without a BZ, which is just a crazy thing to even think about. That like his entire career for 6 years has been with this one guy the entire time. But that also makes it all that more interesting, and those matches will be very, very exciting to watch and to talk about. On the Falcons part of it, though, the fact that they're relocating in name, I've said that already, but it's just like it doesn't matter at the end of the day,
Yeah.
because I think they're all based in Dallas, which is whatever. But I don't dislike this name change nearly as much as the other ones, because this actually makes sense. they are more reflective of Saudi Arabia, even though this coming season's roster is not nearly as reflective of Saudi Arabia as last season's roster when they started the year, where it was all Saudi players and they had kind of a vision for how that would go. At the same time, like, this is very obviously a Saudi org, and like, I think it makes more sense for them to represent, even if it's just in name, represent Riyadh rather than Vegas. But it also did get me thinking about if other organizations would follow suit. Specifically, Heretics makes a lot of sense, even though there is a massive Spanish-speaking population in Miami. And um, as far as U.S. cities go, it's one of the top candidates if the Heretics were to want to represent a U.S. city. Places like L.A., different places in Texas. There's a bunch of cities with a lot of Spanish speakers, but like, if the Falcons are going to represent a city that doesn't really reflect their team roster nearly as much, and they won't be playing from, I think it would make a lot of sense, and I think it is pretty plausible that the Heretics would be like, screw it, we're going to be the Madrid Heretics. Or if they just wanted to be Spanish in general, they could be the Spanish Heretics. I don't know if the CDL would let that fly, just representing an entire country, but that would make a lot of sense to me. They are quite obviously like a Spanish org. There's no debating that. They don't even have a non-Spanish player, except they could if Snoopy comes in, and he's still Spanish speaking, but he would be kind of breaking the mold a little bit. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I do think they will. I know you said that the CDL might not want to do an event because of the schedule. I do not think that it will matter to them one way or the other, because if I'm just going to take a wild guess and say that the Falcons are going to be way more comfortable spending the money on an event than any other CDL team ever before. And that will make all the difference for the CDL. And I think they would, they would probably move around the schedule if they really needed to. Like, if they did a week off or something between online matches and the major, and then a week off between the major and the next online matches, which that part has happened before, so that wouldn't be anything new. But I don't see that their location would be any issue if that were to come down to it. It just, if the Falcons want to host an event, then they will certainly host an event. I have no doubt about that. So we'll see. I think there have been rumors of 2 locations so far, and we don't know how exactly how many majors they're going to be, how that's all going to work out. But I think it's an interesting development. We'll see how things play out. But we have other relocation news to talk about, or reports to talk about, because according to Ronnie Intel of Breaking Point, he reported just a few days ago that FaZe is also planning a relocation, and they would be replacing the Falcons in Las Vegas. He said that, according to sources, Atlanta FaZe has been engaged in discussions about a rebrand, working alongside the CDL to determine if a switch to Vegas is possible and when to roll out the announcement. This comes on the heels of the Vegas Falcons completing their own transformation to the Riyadh Falcons, leaving an open franchise slot in Las Vegas. And then he goes on to say that FaZe is the front runner to take over that spot. And their roster, I guess, this season is relocating to Texas. So there's some different, I guess there's some pretty big news there. One, they've been playing out of Atlanta this entire time, which was pretty cool in the sense that they were one of the only teams still for the entire CDL span to play from their home city. They were also currently still one of the only teams that have been unchanged from either their team name or their city this entire time in the CDL. But I guess that can all change pretty quickly here. What do you think about a potential move for the Atlanta FaZe to become the Las Vegas FaZe, or maybe just Vegas FaZe?
Yeah, so the first thing that came to mind for me after the Cellium announcement and the Falcons rebrand was actually, I was messaging head Ego Chall correspondent Tremi, and I mean, I could scroll back and look at the message. I don't know exactly what I said, but I said something along the lines of like optic to Vegas, because I know I couldn't find the clip, and I admittedly, like, I looked for it for a little bit and I gave up quickly, but I know there was a time on either his podcast or one of the optic podcasts that Hex mentioned something about wanting the Vegas slot like back at the inception of the CDL, and that like the CDL wouldn't give him the Vegas slot. They were like putting it on hold or something along those lines. I can't remember. I'm very, very confident that was the discussion. There was a clip of Hex talking about this. He said something along those lines or in some fashion, and that was the first name that came to mind for me. I wasn't even considering FaZe potentially moving to Vegas, but um, I think, you know, Vegas is a cool city. Um, in theory, it should be like a destination locale for fans
Yeah.
from, you know, all over the place, and there's already the report that potentially Vegas uh FaZe could look to host champs at Vegas this year, and that would be pretty cool. I was at the Vegas event at the Mandalay Bay. Would have been the end of 2017, I believe. Or maybe the end of 2016 for the 2017 season. It was the IW event, um, and that was a pretty cool event. And you know, even like I was in the Mandalay Bay hotel, and like you go down, you had to walk through the casino to get to the event where you know the players were playing. And I remember the first time uh, that I was walking back to my hotel room. It would have been that like Friday or Thursday night, the first night of the event. I like, you know, instead of going straight to the elevator, I went to a blackjack table. They put $20 on black. So like that's just like, you know,
It
part
worked.
of like being in Vegas. And I think I lost like the first couple nights, and then I won and like came close to breaking even. I don't know, but besides the point, Vegas is a fun city, cool place to host events, and we haven't had one there in a long time. And in honesty, you know, FaZe, I don't think they had a home series in Atlanta, and that might have been the last event that was in Atlanta, or the only one that's been in Atlanta.
I believe so.
Um, so it's not like they've been doing a ton of events there. Maybe change of scenery, getting them in Vegas, and inspires them to get some more events and stuff. And I think more events in Vegas is pretty cool. So, yeah, we'll see how that plays out. It will be, you know, I know that if this is, uh, if this does come to fruition, that there will inevitably be times on the podcast in future episodes where I'm like talking about Simp playing and I slip up and say Atlanta. Maybe the roster changes for the FaZe trio helps out, and I won't do it as much. But I feel like it's going to be weird to think of Vegas FaZe as opposed to Vegas Legion or Vegas Falcons or Atlanta FaZe. But that's just the reality of these, you know, geolocation names and whatnot. Kind of like you said, it doesn't matter a ton, but it is interesting. Is considering it, and I guess at the end of the day, like I know how you feel, our listeners know how you feel about the whole geolocation thing for these CDL teams, but there was the report earlier this offseason that like the league teams voted to keep those names, and with teams and orgs changing these locations around, it obviously has to mean something to them, maybe even if it's only on a very basic level, and it's not like that like a brand identity thing, but maybe it's like a sponsorship thing. I don't really even know. But obviously if it didn't actually matter at all, they would just be scrapped, and we'd be talking about phase optic, yada yada. But on some level, the higher ups in the league and these teams do care. Evidently, it feels like about these locations, and that's one explanation for why this is happening. We're seeing a shuffling around of the locations.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that the people running the league and including the team owners, um, I mean, I think they're pretty short-sighted individuals in general because they're also the people that voted for the small media rights deal, even though the logic would dictate that you just try to be in so many places and in front of so many eyeballs that you could potentially get a bigger brand or a bigger media deal down the line, rather than trying to cash out today and limiting your audience to YouTube. They obviously didn't do that, and I think that was a very short-sighted and foolish decision, just like I think the city names is short-sighted and a foolish decision. If you look at traditional sports, I guarantee you, if you could ask privately, if they had to answer truthfully, I guarantee if you asked a bunch of these big professional sports teams, they would much prefer to just be known by their team name and not their city name, because the city name can, in some ways, limit your reach, limit your audience. I mean, you're a little different because you're in New England, and there's a lot of crossover between Boston sports teams and New York sports teams. But if you're like in New York City, if you live in New York City, like you might not ever want to associate yourself with a Boston team, for example, just because it's Boston. Even if it had a bunch of players you liked and just, if there were coaches that you liked and everything, you might not associate, and that would be vice versa for a person in Boston, and a person in Dallas might not want to associate with Houston. Houston might not want to associate with Oklahoma City, whatever the case may be. But like, I mean, Real Madrid, even though it has the city name in it, they don't like pinpoint on the Madrid part very much. Like, that's just how people know them. The Cowboys, like Jerry Jones literally puts his training camp in Los Angeles. Like, he does not do training camp in the team's hometown. He goes out to California to do training camp because why did he say it? He's like, well, there was no LA team, so I might as well be out here. And he was trying to get fans in LA, not in Dallas. So I think it's kind of silly. I think that there's no real good reason unless you're actually representing those cities. And even if you were, you can do it in ways that don't require you to have the city name in there and to have separate team names. Like 100 Thieves is not LA Thieves, which is just a really silly thing to have, especially when we get to Esports World Cup time and all these organizations revert back to their actual brands. That being to the side on this, I think it's intriguing, to say the least, that FaZe, of all teams, would move. I know that originally, I'm almost positive it was a joint venture for FaZe Clan and another organization that is I can't think of at the moment. But it was an Atlanta-based organization.
Sports Ventures.
Yeah. So I wonder if that's still in place, or if this is just like a natural progression, and if they're okay with it, if they're on board with it, I don't know. But that was why they were in Atlanta in the first place, FaZe, because that wasn't like a natural landing spot. Like, no one really thought of Atlanta for FaZe until Atlanta FaZe came around. So they would be more New York based at the time, probably, because they had that FaZe house for a long time. Sure. Or LA. But so I think it's odd. I saw Ronnie's article, and he said that the ownership has ties to Las Vegas. I'm not exactly, I don't know exactly like the extent of that. I did look it up, and FaZe opened FaZe Arcade, presented by Xfinity, at the Palms Casino Resort in Las Vegas back in 2023. And this was during Nick Merck's MFAM Central. I don't know, like, if there's anything more to that. I don't really remember any connection to Vegas with FaZe, but I'm also not watching the FaZe YouTube videos and keeping up to date on what Banks is doing nowadays. So they certainly could be connected in some shape or form, and I'm just not aware. I did see the logo, though, that is floating around, that was reportedly trademarked. Actually, two logos that were reportedly trademarked as the Vegas FaZe logo, and it's kind of stinky. It's not great. I think it would actually work better if they put, so the way it is, the Atlanta FaZe one has like the A and the F. It's reminiscent of the FaZe Clan logo, obviously not nearly as good. And I would say that the Vegas FaZe one is even more reminiscent of the FaZe Clan logo, but they don't have the two bars, like the top bar doesn't go all the way across, and the middle right bar doesn't go isn't there. So it has the F on the left and the V on the right. If you want to just look it up, you could like search Vegas FaZe, I'm sure. But it's not great, especially the one that actually says Vegas. That one's horrible. I don't want to ever see that thing in my entire life. I think they could do better, but what did you think of this potential rebrand?
I don't hate the one that looks like a V with an F on the left side. I think that's like fine to me. It's not like my favorite logo ever, but I don't like hate it. The one with Vegas spelled out, I kind of agree. Like I can picture that on a T-shirt.
That
Like
nobody
it would
buys?
obviously go across the. No, I don't know. I just like that's what like I can picture it as like a bumper sticker or like like I don't picture that on like my screen when I'm watching the matches. I guess it could be on the jerseys and whatnot. I don't know. Uh, I don't totally hate it. I'm just not a huge fan of that. I do like the smaller like the F and the V combined version a little bit more.
Yeah, I just noticed that the original FaZe logo. I mean, this sounds like the dumbest shit in the world because FaZe has been around for like 20 years now. But I just noticed that on the original FaZe logo, that the right side is a C. I just never really put that together. So
I never really thought about that either, to be honest.
it makes me look at it a little bit differently, but I always just
It
saw it
does.
as kind of an F, to be
That's all
honest.
I ever thought too.
So I don't know. Maybe people are like calling us the biggest idiots in the world now.
We might be.
I still think that they should just make it more like the original logo, or just say screw it. We're gonna put the original FaZe logo, and we're just gonna call ourselves Vegas FaZe. What are they gonna do about it? I don't see that happening, but we'll see what happens with Vegas FaZe or Atlanta FaZe. We might have a long off season. They haven't told us anything about when the season might start, so maybe they could relocate. I mean, they're not moving anything unless it's to Dallas, so it doesn't really matter one way or the other. But I don't know if that'll be this season or next season. Based on kind of the CDL's operations over the years.
Just to wrap it up in terms of the rebrands, unless you have something else
No.
either. The where was the tweet that I had? Oh, it was Taylor Miller for Dexerto at Taylor J Miller on Twitter. It was Jacob Hale first tweeting something for like a new logo after that Vegas FaZe thing, and it was G2 Minnesota. Um, so potentially we have alongside Falcons and potentially Vegas, Toronto Koi is we. It seems like it's all but confirmed at this point. But then additionally G2 Minnesota, which I've been vocal before. I really liked the ROKKR at first. Admittedly, the whole like special character for the O thing was annoying from a writing and editing perspective for articles, and I really didn't know what that was all about. But I have said over the years, I thought the ROKKR team did a very good job, especially in terms of like being one of those not like one of those organizations that wasn't previously rooted in COD, coming into the CDL, establishing an identity, doing those like watch parties in the local Minnesota area. They were hosting like the first event, I think, at the kickoff event where Scump was yelling across the stage at Krim when Krim was on Dallas Empire. Um, and so if G2 Minnesota comes to be, I'll be a little disappointed that ROKKR would be seemingly retired. It makes sense though because of, from a business standpoint, if G2, I don't even know if that was ever officially confirmed with G2 getting involved with Minnesota. I think there was really only reports, but maybe it was confirmed and I just missed it. I don't know. But either way, assuming that is like a thing, like it makes sense that they would want to have part of their name in the CDL name. So I get it. I'd be a little disappointed from a ROKKR perspective. So G2 Minnesota and potentially, and then either LA or Paris Gentlemates, which would be another example of a team going from US to uh, other side of the globe, but again, that would be a case similar to Falcons, in my opinion, where it makes sense for Gentlemates to be in Paris with the French roots and everything like that. So none of those are confirmed. Only confirmed rebrand we've got so far is Riyadh Falcons. Everything else is either reported or rumored. But I think that's just the speed on the rebrand front.
Yeah, the G2 Minnesota logo is absolutely atrocious. It is among the most boring logos that could possibly exist in this world. I think it's like the ROKKR font, but it's it's a G2, and then they have like the little slash on the 2, which is in the G2 esports logo. It's shit. Like, this is a horrible logo, especially going from either the G2 like esports logo or the ROKKR logo. This is a massive downgrade, like regardless of how you spin it. Especially, like, it doesn't even make sense, because why wouldn't this be like some kind of, like, I mean, G2 has a samurai and the ROKKR has like a Viking thing going on. It has to be some kind of warrior logo, and it's just a letter. Like, what's going on here? Like, get rid of these dumbass city names. Stop messing around. This sucks. Like, we're losing good logos because of this. I mean, and I'm like, I don't really care one way or the other about, like, I mean, I would prefer ROKKR because it's unique. I've never heard of anything like that. Where G2 Minnesota is like, it's the same as Atlanta FaZe and LA Thieves. Like, it's just like, we want to put our esports name in here. We have to have some kind of city name. That's what we're doing here. The Paris Gentlemates thing, I'm like, if I'm cool with the Riyadh Falcons thing, I'm of course cool with the Paris Gentlemates. Even if they don't have any French players, I still think that at least there is some kind of, like, the org is more Paris than the Paris Legion were. Like, that was the problem I had, was like, they did nothing for the French scene except have Brezzy on the bench for the entire season, and they never like really connected to them. Whereas obviously, like, there is like a pretty vocal support system there in France for the Gentlemates because of Gotaga and his organization. So I'm cool with that. It makes more sense than LA Gentle, or what they call themselves, LA Gorillas Mate, which was the worst name in esports history. It would also open up potentially another LA spot if that is of interest to teams. I would assume, like, of all of the cities, like, LA and New York would be among the biggest. I don't know if that could potentially lead to, if we get expansion, like, holding that for Liquid. If C9 wanted to say, screw this New York crap, like, we're going to LA, we're much more happy about that. If it's, Fanatics, so on and so forth. So that could be of interest to a lot of teams.
Just real quick, and this will put a wrap on it, I promise. You just reminded me of what I said at the start of this section. When I was originally thinking of Optic going to Vegas, part of that in my head was Optic dropping the Texas name would open, like, lead the pathway there for
Empire.
Envy to return as either Dallas or the Texas team. Again, that's just, we don't have any reports or anything indicating that Envy is close to a CDL return. That's just more wishful thinking on my part, but doesn't seem like that's happening. So, but that was in my head, so just threw it out there.
I think there was some report, or maybe even Hastro said it, that
Hastro said he wants to come back.
Yeah, that he has some kind of deal that, like, a non-compete, I think.
Oh, okay.
I think that might have been a report.
That would make sense. No, I remember seeing that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know when that would be up. If I have no idea, but he's been out for like a year or so, less than that. So we'll see what happens. Yeah. So let's get into some more roster based stuff. So we already talked about Cellium confirmed for the now Riyadh Falcons. I'm definitely going to get slipped up on that. I already know that. LAT officially announced the releases of Envoy and Ghosty, something that we had already talked about as it was coming, but this was officially confirmed as of yesterday. I think, this is, how I feel about this because we're both big Ghosty fans.
Yep.
Envoy had a really good season, especially based on what happened last year with Toronto, where it wasn't so great. He was getting slandered quite a bit. I understand that LAT finished the season poorly, and that's unacceptable. At the same point, I still think that if they had just stuck with the same roster going into next season, that they might still be among the best teams or potentially the best team, depending on how things break. Any other like kind of final thoughts on the Envoy and Ghosty eras of LAT?
Nope, just it's official. As far as we know, they are reportedly going together to Gentlemates. So I'm excited to see how that relationship continues to grow with potentially another full year of Envoy and Ghosty competing together. Like you said, think highly of Ghosty. We both do, and I agree with you in the sense of Envoy had a pretty solid year, all things considered, this past season, especially in relation to the previous year, where a lot of people were, the narrative around him was a little down. Um, so yeah, I think the reports as it stands right now is LAT getting a Beezy and Kenny. Haven't heard anything more on that front. I haven't seen anything, so we'll have to wait and see on that. And obviously, the Envoy and Ghosty two Gentlemates, that's unconfirmed too. We just know they will not be on LAT for the 2026 season.
Yeah, the report is that they're going to Gentlemates with Neptune and Sib to make Gentlemates' roster, which is a very intriguing roster. I'm not exactly sure how to go, but a lot of talent and individual success. But obviously, most of that team has not played together, which is always kind of an iffy thing going into a season. Even though if it always kind of works out for most of the teams. FaZe also actually announced things, which is kind of a godsend. They announced that Draza is returning to the Atlanta FaZe, potentially Vegas FaZe roster. That was expected. I know there were like very early reports of like maybe Draza will not be with FaZe because he was an unrestricted free agent. But it looks like he will be coming back, or he certainly will be coming back, and it looks like he'll be coming back with Simp and then bringing in guys from the Vancouver Surge, 04, and Abuza. That's unconfirmed, and we'll see what happens with that. The one that I was most interested in, though, was Minnesota, because you texted me. I was out at the time, and you said that there was a report of Skies, Crimp, Gwyn, and Estriel for the Minnesota ROKKR team. And I did the Alonzo Mourning meme or the GIF because that's like it's like a feast or famine kind of roster because Gwyn has obviously had his noted struggles on LAN at times, but then he finished at champs with like I think maybe even the highest KD of any player or one of them, and he had like that great event. And obviously, Estriel has had some breakout performances. Skies is a world champion, so and Crimp has had some big moments as well. At the same time, like it does feel like we might be in the same position with Minnesota, where like typically you do have like the one vet leader. I don't know if Skies is that, but maybe he is. What do you think of this roster? What do you I guess think of potentially the ceiling is for Minnesota?
I'm not fully convinced on Skies. Obviously, like you
Yeah.
said, world champion. He's won plenty of events, even dating back to his Florida Mutineers days.
Yeah.
Um, so I think Sky is a good player, and I still think highly of him as an S&D player. I'm just a little shocked that he's like one of these names that's being mentioned this early. I know it's not like the very, very early phase of the offseason, but if it was, me thinking about this a couple weeks or months ago, I would have imagined that Skies most likely started in Challengers, and if he didn't, he was like one of the final players being picked up. So I guess in a sense he is like one of those final teams, but there's still some teams that have to make moves. So in that sense, it feels a little earlier than I would have expected. We started hearing Skies' name. Um, But I mean, it's good for him if this does happen. He gets a shot at redemption. Can just put everything that happened last year behind him. I guess in that sense, kind of comparable to what we were just talking about with Envoy. Like had the down year, uh, and then bounce back this past season. Skies has the opportunity to do the same thing here. But really, in my head, this team, the core three being Estriel, Kremp, and Gwyn, it does feel comparable to me of Estriel, Geo, and Nero from last year in the sense of I thought very highly of all three of those players individually. It felt like they had their individual moments where they each had really good maps popping off, and then the other two or one of the other two weren't playing well. So the consistency was the hardest thing. For that former trio on Minnesota, and I feel like that trio is comparable to this one. Maybe Gwen being the rookie of the year, we have to give him a little more credit, and I mean he does play very well online. The whole Gwinternet thing. I agree with you in the sense that he played very well on LAN at the end of the year, or better than he had previously. So maybe it's not a thing, but it is something to keep an eye on. But end of the day, I like Gwen and I like Kremp as individuals. I am interested to see how this team would work together. But I do think at the very least, especially I think highly of Kremp as an S&D player. So in theory, Skies and Kremp together could be a good tandem there in S&D, and I don't think Gwen is bad at S&D or anything. And then obviously Estriel's pretty solid as well. So I think this is a team that has the potential to be a middle of the pack squad, but I did feel that way about the first iteration of Minnesota last year, and then I fell for the trap once Kenny came in to replace Paul X. I thought that team was going to do better than they did, and they kind of baited me from time to time. They had a ton of game fives, and they did win some, and they pulled off reverse sweeps early in the season, but it just wasn't. They weren't able to piece it all together. So, um, I will be interested to see how this works out. But I guess like you said, well, not like you said, like you asked. I think ceiling wise, it's a middle of the pack team with the potential to cause some upsets. Um, do I see them winning championships? Probably not. Do I see them making it to a championship Sunday? Maybe. Um, Not like a super confident maybe, but I crazier things have happened in COD, so I'm not going to totally rule it out. But I think at the very least, I feel like this squad could be competing for one of those last champ spots if it does come together, or it could just not work out at all, and then they're in a similar situation to this past season.
Yeah, I think with Minnesota, like I think the logic on this would be you're kind of buying high on Gwyn and Estriel because they had two good seasons. They're both really young players. Estriel was a rookie, what, like two years ago, because that
Yeah.
was the one that Abuza was complaining about, and Gwyn was a rookie at the same time. So like they're relatively new to the CDL. They've showed a lot of promise. Kremp has had some good moments, and he was also at his best, not this past season, but the season before with LAT, and they like almost won events near the end of the year. So I think there's a lot to like from there. But he had a down year on a bad team this season. Skies, similar situation. Obviously, he was first with the Genomates, and then that was horrible. Then he went to Optic. They were horrible. And I don't think either of those situations are necessarily to be blamed entirely on him. Of course, he
No.
shares part of the blame because, he's 1/4 of the team, but like Optic was bad before Skies got there. So like that obviously was not something that he created. Gentlemates was bad after Skies left. So obviously still not, all on him. And, he's been a really solid player for the solid is underselling. He was a really, really good player for a long time. Yeah. The only thing that concerns me is the same thing and this is not Sky specific, but anytime a veteran player, I shouldn't say older because I don't even know how old Skies is, probably like 25. But anytime a player that's been around for a while has a bad season, I instantly, and this is probably not fair, I instantly like, he's washed. Like what if he just doesn't have it anymore? And not to say that that is the case with Skies, but that's always my concern. If I were to make a roster, they would probably be the worst roster in CDL history. But like, I would just be really terrified of picking up someone like Kenny, who I actually, when we were talking about the potential LAT roster, I made it clear that I wouldn't really want Kenny because I saw what he did last season. I wasn't that big of a fan. Obviously, like that was his worst season as well of his pro career. So again, these could all be anomalies. They could just be one-offs, especially because both those guys were with Optic for part of that season. And I don't know what was going on behind the scenes with that team, but that was a dumpster fire from the beginning of last season until our boy Mercules shows up and is like, Lord and Savior, and he's there to change everything. So getting back to my initial point though with Skies is like, I would just be like pretty hesitant to bring him in. At the same time though, they don't really have a ton of options with ARs, and we talked about this I think on the last few episodes. There are like no free agent ARs. Like everybody got locked down aside from Ghosty pretty much and Abuza, but Abuza then like reportedly went to FaZe, which is again one of the better teams. Ghosty was like the one that seemed kind of attainable for a lot of these teams because he was just kind of being floated out there. And if Ghosty were on this team, I'd have a much different reaction. I'd be all in on the Minnesota ROKKR for the 2026 season. With Skies though, it's I'm just gonna have to wait and see. Like I have to see what he looks like when they actually get into the game. And if he's anything like last season, I think it's going to be tough. And not just because of that, like the league is just so competitive that if, they had a good on paper roster last season and they really never got above like 8th place or 7th place in the league. And that's just kind of where it is with the talent. And I think that could be the case for the Minnesota ROKKR in 2026 as well. This was like one of the first things that happened during our break. But this was like the only thing that happened for like a while. And I was like, I don't know if we really need to go and do an episode just about this, but I think it's Traix. He signed with Miami, becoming the first South American player in the CDL. And Real, obviously not on great terms with the Heretics organization nowadays. He posted something in response to Miami. Traix had like a signed letter or whatever to the Heretics fans, and Real tweeted, said verbal agreement worked on someone. So not looking great on that part. I don't know anything about Traix. He's Argentinian, or no, he's Uruguayan, right? Argentinian or Uruguayan? I can never tell these flags apart.
I think it's Argentina, but I'm not 100% sure. I thought I saw that somewhere.
He is, yes, Argentinian. So yeah. I can never tell those two flags apart. I am sorry to definitely the millions of people from those countries that are watching us right now. I think that's cool. I think that, especially if Miami does bring in Snoopy officially, then they're really like cornering the market on not only Spanish players, but like the Latin American like market essentially, because Snoopy is Mexican, Traix is Argentinian. So you have South American, you have North American, obviously with Mexico, and then you have Europe with all the Spanish guys that they have on their team. So I think that's cool. I'm a big fan of what the Heretics have been cooking over there. Heretics have also been pretty good at least identifying talent. With obviously
all of them.
Yeah, pretty much. Like even Real, even though I think everybody thought that he could be pretty good, but they had who we thought were the top 2 rookies this season, Mercules excluded, and I mean they were among the best teams at the end of the season. So, I'm pretty excited about it. I'm sure you don't know anything about him, but what do you think of the signing?
Yeah, so I was saying it as Traix in my head. I guess maybe it's a part of the Kleenex effect. I don't even know how to actually say his name, but regardless of that, we'll hear it for the first time on broadcast, and then we'll be good from there. But regardless of how you say his name or whatnot, we obviously neither of us know much about him other than what's been posted online. I see on the Breaking Point Twitter, they tweeted he had a 1.2 KD, which was the fifth overall at Challengers Champs last season. That's according to Breaking Point, so obviously that's a pretty solid performance there. 22 years old from Argentina, like you said, and yeah, I just think that that was the biggest thing for me is I said this over the last couple of years, but I know I said it in one of the recent episodes. Is that's been the Heretics approach is they have done a phenomenal job at identifying this talent, and it might not manifest right away, and it might be in the form of signing a player as their fifth man, and then partway through the season they add him to the roster and they take off. So we don't know exactly if Traix, if he's a starter, or if he'll start the season on the bench. But regardless, first South American CDL Pro, that's awesome. I think uh, we've talked about it, especially even before we did the podcast, really like the pre CWL era for COD, so dominated by North America, and then since it's been like slow trickles of like Europe starting to have some really strong players. Hydra winning a world championship for Europe, becoming the first European to do that. Now getting the Spanish players in, Saudi Arabian players last year. Now we got a South American player. Like it's really becoming more of a global thing, which didn't really feel like that was the case. Obviously, in other esports, that is how it works, and NA is seemingly a laughing stock in some of those other esports, but COD, it was always NA first, all the other regions second. Now we're starting, maybe it's taken a while to get the wheels turning, but we're starting to get players from other regions, so I think that's really cool. Um, and yeah, well, like I said, I spoke very highly of Heretics and Miami's ability to identify these Spanish speaking players and implement them successfully into their system and have a strong product. And based on Rancor and Super just this past year, I expect Traix or Traix to, have an immediate impact if he's a starter. And if not, I would be shocked if he wasn't a player to come off the bench at some point during the season for the squad. So we'll have to wait and see to learn even how to say his name properly, what his role exactly is on the squad, whether starter, bench, etc. But end of the day, right now, I'm just excited about this move, excited for the potential of the squad. I've spoken highly of Riyadh in the past, so I do, that my mind just now, as I'm saying this, I go back to like the Lins trying to fill the shoes for Hydra situation with Gentlemates last year. I don't think this is the extent right now of like Traix trying to fill the shoes of Real. Like that's not a very apt comparison, but just for lack of a better one, that's kind of what it feels like to me. Like and obviously any match Real against these Miami guys, maybe not the Miami players themselves because it seems like Real is still close with the guys, but from the organizational standpoint, there's going to be some added fire in those matches and stuff. So I'm excited to see how that all shakes out this year.
I also thought that it could be Traix because I is sometimes E in
Okay.
Spanish. That was my high school Spanish education working there. So that just we'll have to see. It'll be in like whatever 5 months when the CDL officially starts their season, and we'll get to find out. But yeah, they Miami has done, like you said, a great job at identifying, and also I think the most important thing is they take a chance. Like if it doesn't work out,
Yeah.
they just bench that player or they'll release them. But they're not afraid to swing for it. And if it doesn't work out, okay, like we'll find another guy, we'll try that person, and we'll see how it works out then.
And I mean, to be fair, the only time it hasn't worked out was with Eric Boom.
Yeah.
And I have seen stuff on just even Twitter, or maybe it was in some of those streams I was watching with like Zuma and Methods and them talking about roster mania and stuff. He's been a name that's been at least like maybe not in conversation with teams, but it's in from a community standpoint. It's like is Eric Boom going to get another shot? So it's not even like
Yeah.
Eric
There's
Boom was a
been
total failure
yeah,
for
yeah.
Miami. It was just it didn't work out in the short term. They brought Real in, and then that really worked out uh, for Miami. So you could if Eric Boom gets another shot and plays even serviceably for another team, then that's like the quote unquote worst project that the Heretics have had in trying to develop all these players. So end of the day, that's just that's what they've been able to do, and I think that's important for we've talked about this. You know, we got Cellium reportedly getting super mega bag from a team like other organizations can't do that. They have to find another way to get their players and build an identity and a brand, and Miami's just hit a home run on that front in my eyes.
Yeah, with Eric Boom, it was just a weird situation. They had the five player roster.
Yeah.
Journey, I think, started the season after they thought that Eric Boom would be starting the season with them, and then he came in like 2 months later. He got 2 months, and then obviously Real comes in, and it's like, well, you're not going to replace him. So, like, now that Real is gone, maybe that opens it up, and also like, who knows how he would work out with Super now, because Super adds a different element to this team than they had previously. I mean, there's just a lot of differences, and I think he is 22. Eric Boom is, so he'll be 23 next month. Like, that's still really young,
Yep.
and he definitely could get another shot, especially with the Heretics. C9, not great. This news was not what, like, literally the last thing that you could ever want to hear if you were a Cloud9 fan. So Ronnie Intel, this was earlier today, actually. He put out, I mean, if I read the headline of this article, I'd have a panic attack if I was a C9 fan. The headline is, "What's going on at Cloud9?" question mark. I would just like pass out right there, because that's like never good when people are like, a reporter is openly questioning your team like that. But basically, he said that C9 may have the smallest budget in CDL history this offseason, which I don't even know how that's possible. I mean, the only possibility is that because there are no minimums anymore, like, they have somehow reached levels of depravity and cheapness that not even the Paris Legion could reach, which is a ridiculous thing to even think about. Because I assume that they were paying those guys like nickels and dimes, like, that they found in the couch, the couch that they all, I guess, lived on or whatever, in Dallas, what they were saying with the Legion. But I don't think they have any players. They don't have any coach. They don't have any money. So what's the deal with C9? I guess go back to the question, what's going on at Cloud9? So, Bink, I ask you, what's going on at Cloud9?
I wish I had an answer for you. Something I just thought about in the moment. I'll get to that in a second. But immediately when I saw this report earlier today, I was just absolutely perplexed. You think about Cloud9 as a very noteworthy esports organization entering the CDL at the end of the 2024 season with the New York Subliners roster that included Hydra. It would have been Hydra Skies, Kismet, and Sib. Um, and maybe it was really a case of Cloud9 truly thought they were going to get that spot and they were going to have Hydra locked up, be the franchise player, and go from there. And obviously, things did not go that way for Cloud9, and now they just aren't sure where to go from here. Um, the fact that, it's obviously just one report,
Yeah.
and I still think Cloud9 is in a position to pay players adequately or even, above average. Not certainly, because like you said, the smallest budget in CDL history, my mind immediately goes to Paris Legion / Vegas Legion. So I would be very surprised if Cloud9 was in a position where it's paying its players less than that team that seemingly, just to be frank, seemingly felt like they had no interest in even competing in
Yeah.
Call of Duty, and I don't think that's the case for Cloud9. One thing that I just thought about while you were talking was Cloud9's League of Legends team, which, I think depending on where you are a fan of in esports, maybe you think of Cloud9 for Counter-Strike with that whole major they won in NA, but for me, Cloud9, I immediately think of the League of Legends squad.
Yeah.
They did not do well at the end of the season. They had a pretty strong team throughout the year, as far as I'm aware, and they floundered in the LCS, which is now the LTA. They floundered in the NA League of Legends playoffs, and they won't be at Worlds this year. So maybe this is pure speculation, but maybe it's a situation where that happened, and now Cloud9's like, we have to go full force on the League of Legends roster to improve that roster, and as a result, we aren't going to spend as much on the Call of Duty roster. Uh, I would not. I would be surprised if that was actually true, but I would be lying if I said that wasn't a thought that just crossed into my mind. So that's pure speculation on my part. I got nothing to back that up, but I did just think about it and felt like it's fair game to throw it out there when you got a report saying they might have the smallest budget in CDL history. Um, End of the day, though, I do think, it is a little interesting that, again, with the pedigree and the, just the allure around the name Cloud9, it was a little confusing to me why we hadn't heard Cloud9 be attached to really any player at all this offseason. So that makes me feel like maybe there is a little more on the side of the truth to this report than potentially the other way. And obviously, end of the day, like Cloud9 Jack is pretty open. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a thread on Reddit already where he's like refuting this report. I'm not sure if there is, but wouldn't be surprised if that's a thing that happens sometime soon. So, I think we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. I do expect Cloud9 to have a competitive roster by the time all things are said and done. I don't know what that roster will look like at this point. But this, I would be lying if I didn't say this is a concern, especially for a team, like I said, came in not even 2 years ago, and we were expecting them to be, a team that was an instant player, and it doesn't seem like that's the situation they're in right now. But we'll wait and see.
Okay, so the last Paris Legion roster was Temp. I will not slander my boy Donnie. Gravity, like Tom. Jimbo. I'll let that one linger a little bit. And Ojani. No problem with Ojani. Still, that's kind of the competition that we're talking about. And I would assume that's the cheapest roster because the next season was Clayster. And I mean, maybe Clay was like, I'll take the minimum, just to be on a CDL team. But regardless, he's Clayster. It's just a different thing that we're up against. I just can't believe that. Kismet's going, the rumor is for the Falcons, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that was my plan though. If Kiz wasn't on a roster, I was gonna have to crowdfund for Jack, just so he signs Kiz to C9. Yeah, I don't know what to do there though. They're the last, them and Carolina have not really done anything, and I guess Austin really hasn't. There haven't been a lot of talk about what they might do. That's really bad company to be with though, because those teams are constantly been rumored as leaving the CDL for the last few years. So not great for C9. And I know you were just speculating. You have no info or any reports about the LTA thing, but if that were to be true, what are you guys doing? You got to pay your bum ass League of Legends roster $20 million to get stomped at Worlds or possibly not make it. And you don't have I don't know, $500,000 to pay a somewhat competent CDL team. Where's the logic in that?
I'm not sure. I mean, it is worth mentioning there was the situation earlier at the very start of this past season where there were seemingly online issues for the Cloud9 team because they were required to live in the LA area or the community that Cloud9 has there. So maybe that's a maybe that's a deterrent. Maybe some players don't want to go to Cloud9. That's again speculation. But I mean, there are again. We were just talking about Minnesota. I immediately think of Geo and Nero as two players who Cloud9 could, they shouldn't be super expensive, and they would both be pretty solid players to at least start to attempt to build a team around for Cloud9. We don't really know what Slasher's deal with Carolina is, but if he's actually a free agent, he's from California. I could see them potentially giving him a shot. TJ Halley, another name, like a veteran, potentially could get a shot with Cloud9. I don't think Nasty has been tied to any team. He was like originally a part of the Gentlemates report, and then that switched to SIB. Yeah, because it's reportedly Envoy, Ghosty, Neptune, and SIB now. So maybe Nasty is a name that Cloud9 could target. So there are pieces. Awakening too. I think Awakening was officially released by Boston. So there are some names out there of players that they could still put something together, and it's an opportunity for a Cloud9 to maybe do some, dig into challengers a little bit and try to find a diamond in the rough. Especially if the report's true and they're not like spending a ton. That's a way you give some rookie and challengers who you have, maybe someone like Abe who played for Toronto at Esports World Cup. That's just one name. I know there's a bunch of other names for challengers players out there. We've talked about Afro in the past. I think that's probably more likely for a full UK team, but at this point, who knows? Maybe Cloud9 goes for a bunch of UK players and tries to go that direction. So I don't know. We'll have to see. It is. It is a little concerning that this is now a report and it's something that we're talking about, though.
Yeah, they could get like Cobra,
Yeah.
who we talked about. Rambo is currently a free agent. Like he could be a coach for C9. I mean, they have options. Like it's not great, obviously, because you're taking a lot. Like you most likely be taking guys that are left over from the CDL shuffle or guys that weren't picked up from challengers. None of those options are particularly enticing, especially for like fans, because that means that you're probably not going to be incredibly competitive. But if C9 is looking at this like maybe like we're kind of rebuilding this year, we're just going to maybe run out the clock to see if the big free agents that like whose contracts end next offseason, we kind of free up the room to sign them. If that were to be like an option, I'm being optimistic because like that would, that could be exciting for C9 or their fans to be like, hey, like we know that let's just say like we know that Hydra and Scrappy and Simp and Joe Deceives and all these other players, their contracts are up next offseason, not this offseason. So we're just kind of sign our guys to 1-year contracts, maybe with an option for the team. We'll see how it goes this year. And then once we get to next summer, we're all in. Like we're competing with the Falcons, we're competing with LAT, Optic, FaZe. We're trying to get all of those players. That's the most optimistic that I possibly could be. The more realistic is that, the more realistic is that they are just like, we are not making any money on this unless we don't spend any money on this. And that's not a bad idea if you like to be the Paris Legion or the Vegas Legion. So congratulations. They might literally be the last place team if this continues. Because at least Vancouver, who lost their entire team and head coach, like reportedly are kind of interested in some of the Omit guys like Mamba and Craze.
Yeah.
Like I'm all in on that. Like I've already talked about it. Like I'm cool with that because those guys actually won Challengers finals. There's some kind of track record with that, and like there's hope there. Just kind of picking and choosing random Challengers players, I don't know if that really does anything for C9, which is among the biggest and most well-known esports organizations. So for them to do that would be particularly crazy, in my opinion. Black Ops 7, more stuff has been kind of talked about, and I guess we talked about it before about like bringing old maps back into the fold and how that might be, some people get annoyed because that means like less creativity. I'm more of the thought, and I think that you're kind of the thought, like if these are good maps, regardless if they've been in the game before, like it's worth having them there. And there were hints to potential Meltdown and Yemen coming back in Obviously, both Black Ops 2 maps. Um, I mean, they both of them eventually rotated out of map rotations. Um, S&D for sure, because Yemen was like an early rotation for Black Ops 2. Meltdown, I felt like maybe I think Meltdown might have stuck around for S&D.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
not sure.
but obviously, Meltdown has literally some of the greatest moments in Call of Duty history, including Karma's Ninja Diffuse and the end of the very first COD Champs in 2013. So, some history there for COD esports. Um, but like you put in the notes, can't have fringe BO6 situation. And by that is putting it in the game like right around champs when there's no chance of it actually coming into the competitive rotation. That being said, that is exactly what is going to happen, I think, with at least one of these maps. And we are going to have a furious conversation in like June 2026 about it. So, what do you think about these maps potentially coming in?
I'm not sure if that's true. I'm obviously maybe I'm being a little too optimistic on that front, but in this developer vlog, they were talking about like the CDL and having maps from previous games, and I forget what the exact question was, but it was something along those lines of using previous maps or Black Ops 2 maps in CDL, and the one developer specifically said that a map that was in Black Ops 2 for Search and Destroy will be in Black Ops 7. The other female developer said that there will be a map returning that will have you thinking you're the best in the game. And obviously, that's a nod to the Scump clip where he's yelling that on Yemen. So that's where the hints come for Meltdown, because Meltdown was a Search and Destroy map in Black Ops 2, as Preston said. And then the Scump thing is a nod to Yemen. Um, so I feel like if they're mentioning it this early, again, even before the beta, like they might not be in the game at launch, but I feel like they would have to be here pretty early on if
Like
they're already
reloaded?
talking about it. Yeah, maybe like the season one or at the latest season two of Black Ops 7. Um, but I am pretty hopeful. I'm not entirely sure how Meltdown will play, but I do think it's the one thing I have felt, especially in these newer games, is some of the maps that are on the smaller side because of the speed of the game now and the advanced movement mechanics and everything. Some of the smaller maps have had issues being truly strong competitive maps in the newer games. But I feel like, maybe not Meltdown, because Meltdown's like a medium sized map, but it
Yeah.
is a little on the smaller side. Yemen, in my opinion, I said this to Tremor when I was talking to him. Yemen, to me, I haven't played it in over a decade, but it always felt like a bigger map.
Yeah.
But it's not like super big to the point where it feels like you're running forever. I feel like Yemen is the size map that, because of the advanced movement, it's a bigger map that wouldn't feel super big in today's game. Maybe could be pure copium, but that was my immediate gut reaction to this news. Um, I think at the very least, Yemen could be a serviceable addition to the hardpoint rotation. Um, we'll have to see how the spawns and how it plays and everything like that. But that's my immediate reaction there. And then Meltdown, if it is able to be implemented in Search and Destroy, I'm all for that because, like you said, so many iconic moments on that map already in the past. I would love to see today's players playing on it and see how they tried to adapt it and innovate on a pretty iconic map in Call of Duty history that frankly it's one of these I forget the exact conversation we were having, but when we were talking about Raid and Express and Hijacked, when those were like confirmed coming back at launch, I believe we were saying like they're just speaking in generalities, there have been maps that we think could maybe come back and they just haven't ever been remade. This is a case where if Meltdown and Yemen come back in Black Ops 2, it's two maps that maybe they weren't the most popular maps in Black Ops 2, but it will be a change in the sense of it's a map that hasn't been remade in the past, is getting a chance to shine in a newer game. And at the very least, I'd be excited to see how it works out.
Yeah, I mean, with some of like as far away as we have gotten from Black Ops 2, like when it's not like raid and standoff and like the maps that were always played back then, it's essentially like putting in new maps. If we're being honest, like a lot of the players now probably did not play Meltdown and Yemen, of like just pros. Like, half the league is like 24 or under. So at least competitively, like they might have gotten started around that time and remember that from then. But like it's been a really long time. Like it'll be 13 years this November that Black Ops 2 came out, which just makes me feel really, really old. Holy crap. But that's kind of like Meltdown and Yemen haven't been remade. I think they're cool maps. Yemen I remember Yemen kind of sucking, but it also has like, it's pretty unique. That I think I don't know if there was a hill like the really small square one. It's like a little room basically, like in mid, which I would love to see how that could be played in modern hardpoint, with how fast things are. People are going to get cameraed like crazy in that hill. Meltdown is like a 3-lane map. Like it is pretty much prototypical.
Yep.
I think it would work, to be honest. It could be a little fast, but I'd rather have it be a little fast than a little slow personally. But I guess we'll see what happens. And just because these maps come in to the game doesn't necessarily mean that they'll make it into competitive, which is always kind of a fight, especially with the players. And maybe the CDL will just override them like they did last season. Is like, oh, we don't really care. Like, we're putting this map in the rotation and you're just going to like it, which definitely makes a lot of friends. Last thing, no, what were you going to say?
I just will say, you mentioned it, and I got to make sure to hammer it home too. It's just, it would be absolutely unacceptable if these maps are teased in September and they aren't added to Black Ops 7 until June or July, and then we just get another wasted opportunity like we did with Fringe and Black Ops 6. And I will say, I've played more pubs over the last couple weeks with Trem and my cousin Chris than I have, and Black Ops 6 pubs than I have in months. And I've played Fringe a couple times now. It feels really good, and I just think it's a travesty that we didn't get to see it at all in the competitive game for Black Ops 6. So that's where my mind's at with this. That's just unacceptable. It cannot happen with Meltdown and Yemen. Even if Meltdown and Yemen are the worst remade maps ever, we just can't waste the opportunity to have those maps potentially be in the CDL.
My hot take is that when maps come in like past the halfway mark in a game, they should automatically roll over to the next game and just be a part of the release date, because then we'd have Fringe and competitive right away, and we wouldn't have to deal with any of this. Because
I made a joke last night when we were playing, is like where we were rushing I think it's B bomb is all like past the train tracks on Fringe, and I was like, imagine just wall bouncing off these walls. I can't wall run on these walls. It felt a little weird, but I was just rushing on the ground. But like in Black Ops 7, we've seen the wall bouncing. Like that would be perfect in the train tracks there in Fringe, but doesn't seem like it's the case.
Last thing, Dexerto reported yesterday, on Friday, that according to their sources, DreamHack is making its return to the United Kingdom and will be bringing with it the Call of Duty League, which will be the CDL's first return to the UK since 2020, if I'm not mistaken, right? I don't think there's been an event since before the pandemic.
Yeah, probably not.
So it would be DreamHack, and obviously DreamHack was a part, or the CDL was a part of DreamHack this past year, which was the first time that had happened in years, or I guess the CDL forever, but COD in general being a part of DreamHack was different. And also, Dexerto reported in that same article that Paris might also host the fourth major. So the report is that it'll be England in for the second major, and then we'll get Paris in the fourth major. And I'm not sure. Obviously, that's a report. Not sure of the validity of it. It'd be interesting for sure. I think like anybody that's like listened to us for a long time knows how I feel about the European crowds. I love them. I don't love the times, to be quite frank about it, but I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of my sleep and my convenience to have better crowds internationally, and especially because, I mean, we don't have an English team anymore, which is kind of a travesty in its own right, because England was kind of like Europe's COD base for a long time. But Paris would be great because of Gentlemates, and I think that's something to really be excited about. What do you think of DreamHack Birmingham potentially being on the CDL schedule this season?
Yeah, unlike you, I've been pretty open in the past in saying that I don't uh, get all of the hype around the European crowds. Just I personally like I know they European fans seem to hate some of uh, the repetitiveness of chants that happen here.
Let's go
Uh,
Optic. Let's go
yeah, and
Optic.
stuff like that. But from my perspective, there are a lot of chants that they do, and I have no freaking clue what the hell they're even saying. So that could just be my a personal issue with me, but that's my take on that. I know I am in the minority in that sense, but regardless, I do think at the end of the day, it's been a long time coming for COD to return and have a European event. So a lot of people will be happy, and I think that's at the end of the day, it's important to try to, keep everybody feeling involved because let's just say this was another year where there wasn't a European event. Maybe there's some European fans who are just like, yeah, screw this. I'm done watching COD esports and gonna go watch another esport or whatever that actually has events in my home country. And as the CDL, the position it's in, you can't afford to be losing fans. You want to be gaining fans. So, yeah, I think it'll make a lot of people happy, and like you, I guess I will. If this does come to pass, I'll have to sacrifice some sleep. But there have been a lot of events where European fans have had to stay up very late to, if they wanted to watch all the matches because of the time difference on that end. So give and take there.
Well, I mean, England should have won the war, so if they want the Call of Duty convenience, they had two shots and they lost. So. I should also mention that Insider Gaming was the first to report
Yes.
about DreamHack Birmingham, and they specifically said that it would most likely be March 26 to 29 for DreamHack Birmingham. The CDL event might not be that entire time; it could just be like the 27th to the 29th or 26th to the 28th or whatever. But so they were the first to announce it, and also that it would be the second major of the season, which, based on how things have been working, if it's the end of March for the second major, then the first major would be sometime in February, like mid-February-ish, mid to late maybe. But we've also had breaks in between some of these majors, and you never really know how these things are going to go. I think they also announced that Toronto would be the first major.
Oh, I didn't see that.
That's what the article says, but I can't find that in the actual Insider Gaming article. So I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, so what the Dexerto article says is Dexerto sources can confirm the Insider Gaming reports. The CDL will be visiting the United Kingdom, Paris, and Toronto. And they have Toronto as Major 1, DreamHack Birmingham as Major 2. Don't know about Major 3, but Major 4 in Paris. Honestly, they might have more than 4 majors, to be quite honest about that. And like you said, there is the potential that Vegas could host champs if FaZe could get their way and relocate and do all of that. But there's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts. Like, we've seen this before. Even things that everybody thinks is going to happen, like the CDL backs out at the last moment, or something happens. Like, we've had a lot of those situations even after announcement. We've had majors that are hosted in Burbank, California, for example, or Columbus, Ohio, and without any fans. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but I think we should just proceed with caution with any of this information. But if that were to be true, then that would make 3 majors outside of the United States, potentially 4 if Saudi Arabia gets involved. I think that would be pretty indicative of where we are with the CDL, just in general, like that not a lot of these teams really want to be hosting these events, and that Toronto is like one of the only teams that consistently is like, yes, we would love to host this event. Optic might be another one because they have the esports stadium connection, so they could kind of get in on that pretty easily. But I don't know how many majors there might be, so we'll see what happens with all of that. Anything else before we get out of here?
I think that does it.
All right, so we're nearly at 90 minutes for the show. That more than makes up for the 3 weeks that we missed, and we didn't, do a show or anything. We appreciate anybody tuning in, listening, or watching. Please subscribe, like, or follow the podcast feed wherever you're listening or watching on. Make sure to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify. Please give us a nice review on Apple Podcasts as well. We're on all of the platforms, literally like all of them. I think Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube as well. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. And follow us on Twitter at jbink with 2 Ks, at Pres Byers, and the podcast Twitter is at Ego Chall Podcast. Again, not sure exactly what's going to happen with the next show. Hopefully it'll be a shorter time period before the next show, but I don't think Bink and I want to do a show where we have like absolutely nothing to talk about. That would not be ideal, but we'll let you know. We'll go live and post videos when we do have stuff to talk about, and hopefully that is soon. That does it for me. Bink, take it away.
Yep. Thank you guys, as always, for all the support. Like Preston said, don't know when the next time we'll be live, but should be hopefully sometime soon if we get some good stuff to talk about. Lots of reports over these last couple weeks and even earlier that just haven't been confirmed yet. And even for some of the stuff that feels like it's like a lock at this point isn't officially a lock. So we will have stuff to talk about. It's just a question of when. So I know this always feels like a weird period because we had a pretty consistent schedule always during the season. Then just the off season is a bit hit or miss in terms of when we actually have stuff to talk about and when we can do a show. But nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Hope you guys will like, subscribe, leave a review, all that good stuff Preston mentioned, and hope you'll tune in whenever the next time we do go live is. So thank you guys as always, and remember to send the chow.